Good morning, Neshko. Thanks so much for tuning in this morning. I know that you have a lot on your to-do list and your calendar is very dense, especially this time of year. So I really appreciate you joining me today to share on a topic that really matters a lot to me, which is how audience data can lead to better content marketing. And so our session is 10 p.m. Do you know where your audience is? And it really applies to any time and any day because successful healthcare marketers really get to know their audience, not just who they are during the day, but who they are as a complex human being and what knowing that might mean for improving your marketing strategy. So what underpins everything we're going to talk about today is that the smartest and most successful healthcare organizations and truly successful businesses serve the communities that they sell to, and they do that by understanding what keeps them up at night. And so, if you're also from the 80s, I was a middle child. I got my start trying to earn attention from audiences as that middle child in the yellow canary pajama sleeper trying to get my mom's attention. So I'm from the 80s, and so is the reference that is the title of this session. So it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? Getting attention back then was a little easier than it is today, though it is where I got my start. So I've been doing this for about 30 years, figuring out how to get audiences' attention. Back then, you just had to focus on your mom. You didn't have to worry about AI. You didn't have to worry about TikTok. It was simpler. And let's just say that things have got more complex. So thinking that getting attention for a living is really what I wanted to do, I started a band, of course. And that was fun while it lasted, but there's a reason I'm doing a webinar today. And I'm not at Coachella or some even hipper concert venue that I don't even know about. After the band broke up, which is a real phrase for my real life, I joined the school newspaper and tried my hand at writing and reporting. Not trying to brag, but I broke the story about how ranch dressing was threatening to become the top condiment at Penn State University over ketchup. So suffice it to say, I wasn't the greatest news reporter. And actually, my dog literally ate this article. True story. He was chewing on it. It was in a scrapbook, and I just thought it was a funny photo. But I knew that I wanted to be in some sort of career that had to do with words and writing and creating things. So I found myself in the world of publishing after college and parlayed that into a career working with brands that were trying to become publishers. I spent probably 10 years working with some amazing brands, serving some really cool and interesting audiences before I did something that my dog, who ate my previous reporting, thought was really crazy, which was start my own consulting company to help businesses act more like publishers by serving the audiences that they sell to on a day-to-day basis. So started Revmade about 7.5 years ago. You can see my Beagle mix was very concerned. He said, "Dad, are you sure this is a good idea?" But 7.5 years later, we're still standing and feel really fortunate that we've been able to help some organizations tap into audience trends to help market themselves better. We've been really lucky to work with a bunch of amazing clients and even win a few awards along the way. And those awards are actually what brings me here today. I've been able to, be a co-pilot on some really successful programs, in content marketing. I got to work with Cleveland Clinic, with Mayo Clinic, a lot of the leaders in healthcare marketing. And what I wanted to talk about today is a project that we've been working on for the past 7-ish years. So really, when we started the company, this was one of our first clients, and it's a program by Northwell Health, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. So I wanted to share kind of a behind the scenes of how this content marketing program uses data, audience data, to drive the entire content operation. It's a 3-time winner of the Best Content Strategy Award at the Content Marketing Awards, and it set records internally for its performance and impact and efficiency. And this program is called The Well. It's produced by an organization called Northwell Health. And really what it is a wellness and editorial platform that's designed to earn trust and preference in Northwell's community through expert editorial content that's delivered to them with empathy and humanity and expertise behind it. But the underpinning of the entire program is it's based on knowing the audience, understanding what keeps the audience up at night, and bringing content to that audience in the ways and shapes, forms, and channels where they're spending time in and being influenced. So when we started the program, we had a very sobering moment, which was addressing this reality. The most successful call to action in all of marketing and advertising history is actually skip ad. Kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke, but we all know and have a really good reflex to when the content that we want to engage with begins, sometimes an ad gets in the way, and we're very good at finding that X or finding the skip ad button. And that's not to poke fun at our industry, but it's really to address a reality that every marketer and healthcare marketers especially need to understand, which is nobody wakes up in the morning thinking about your brand or your organization or your hospital or your health product, whatever your business is all about. They think about what kept them up last night. They think about what they need to do that day, and they think about what they want to become one day. So really, great marketers go to bed with their audiences and really understand inside the minds of what keeps them up at night, what inspires them to get out of bed in the morning, what do they need to do every single day to be a more healthy, happy, full, and present human being. And with that kind of foundation, learning your audience, studying your audience, empathizing with your audience, you can become a lot more of an effective marketer and probably a more empathetic marketer. So I want to show you how, through an example of how we tap into audience data to drive the decisions that we make, not just the content that we produce, but the channels that we're active on, and how we approach our entire marketing system. And so when we think about it, you can relate to this audience. If you've ever had a cough and happen to have a phone, you can certainly relate, which is, you have that cough and then you go, could my cough be cancer, pneumonia, allergies, acid reflux, heart related? Could it be hay fever? Could it be lung cancer? Could it be mold from bronchitis? What causes excessive coughing? Why am I coughing so much? What are the side effects of coughing too much? Can coughing too much damage my throat? So we know what it's like anytime you ask the internet about your symptoms, regardless of what they are, you're going to be led down a path that causes more anxiety than it solves for. And once you click, you realize that the internet can be very, very dramatic. And the internet is the gateway of content discovery. It's the gateway of influence. And it's really where smart organizations are studying their audiences and being present to. But what we found whenever we started this program was that after you click on a search result, you find a lot of those results are media companies that are trying to monetize your anxiety through scare tactics and clickbait and engagement traps. And in a lot of cases, it can do more harm than good. And whenever you think about it, it's like, what are people finding whenever they're at 4 a.m., looking on a forum, getting advice from other people? Well, the promise of the internet was very exciting at first. Anyone could publish content online, and then it became a nightmare. It's like, wait, anyone can publish content online? So there are forum entries out there that are influencing people and will astound you as a marketer and probably medically mislead the person who's reading it. So there's media companies trying to monetize anxiety. There's forums really confusing people, sometimes even nefariously. And then there's a new crop of influencers. There's celebrities that have launched media companies. There are influencers who are hawking products. There's social media gurus pitching lifestyles and selling subscriptions and selling courses. And none of it is really serving that audience member who has a real problem and a real concern and is losing sleep over it. When they go online to solve their problems, what they're finding is people trying to monetize the fact that they have a problem versus solve that problem in the first place. This is what the data was telling us when we looked at search, we looked at social, we looked at who was influencing these people. Meanwhile, we found a really scary thing, which was that there's nothing that goes viral quite like misinformation. Misinformation is traveling at the speed of conversation in social media, and that's especially true as it pertains to health information. And if you're a healthcare marketer that has worked in the business previous to COVID or during COVID, you know that misinformation is running rampant, and it's actually impacting lives in a negative way. And that started to underscore the opportunity that we saw. We saw that there was more expertise available than ever before, but unfortunately it was competing with misinformation, with myths, with hoaxes, with fake news, with forum spam, with influencer hot takes, with media companies trying to monetize that anxiety inside of quelling it. And this was the scene as we started this program about 6 years ago, and it's only become worse every single year. So the organizations that could be taking more of a role, hospital systems, healthcare marketers, what we found were mostly sanitizing the truth. They're being overly stiff, overly clinical. In other words, the joke that we came up with during our audience studies that led to the launch of the program was that nobody smiles when they're getting a colonoscopy. But if you look at stock photo libraries, you would probably think that maybe that is the case. The point here is that hospital systems and health brands weren't inserting themselves into the conversation to address the pain points, the needs, the fundamental truths that people were looking for online. They were kind of very stiffly, dryly and clinically marketing themselves as the best and brightest versus we can really solve your problem. And that left our audience alone in their darkest moments. not just trying to manage their own care, but manage their partner's healthcare, manage their children's healthcare, manage their parents' healthcare. They were left hanging when it came to getting their problem solved. They were Googling, they were looking on social media, they were reading these influencer sites and forum entries, and they were really just getting more and more anxious. And as they managed their everyday lives, they didn't really have a trusted expert. They still don't have a trusted expert in all cases to help navigate their day to day. In seeing what our audience was going through, and this is a really important point, instead of just thinking about what is this hospital great at, and that's what we're going to build around, what we decided was let's build around what the audience's problems are. And the audience is telling us their problems through their search queries, through their questions in social media, through who they're following in social media from a health and wellness perspective. And what we saw was there's a huge opportunity for a voice of truth to speak to people in their moment of need that should come from a hospital system. And nobody was really filling that role at the time that we started this. And so Ramon Soto, who's Northwell's CMO, he saw an opportunity amidst all this and challenged us and the marketing team at Northwell to figure out ways that Northwell could actually be for them at those moments of darkness. Before they were actually physically interacting with the system, how could Northwell connect with people and guide them? How could they help them in the moment and offer them next steps? So this is a story of how we activated what makes Northwell special to be that voice of truth, to be that voice of reason for people when they needed help the most. So how could we do this? How could we help our audience? How could we respond to the pain points that the data was showing us on a day-to-day basis? Well, we zoomed out and we realized that Northwell had a ton to build from. And many of your organizations probably have a similar thing, which is you have great experts, right? So Northwell was an amazing brand. They're New York State's largest employer. 85,000 people work there. 2 million people go through their various doors every single year. I think they deliver 30,000 babies per year. Don't quote me on that, even though this is being recorded, but it's really, really an impressive operation. And in that is a ton of expertise, experience, insight, intuition, gut instinct, heartfelt thoughts. There's a lot to tap into. And our thought was, when people are in their moments of need and they're searching online and they're being influenced by influencers and social, they're looking through TikTok and making healthcare decisions based on what they're seeing there. We thought, wouldn't it be great if they could actually connect to the same people who deliver care and miracles and babies every single day at Northwell? If people could connect with them online through content, couldn't that be a great way to solve their problem in the moment, but also to build a relationship and build trust between them, the audience member, and us, the provider of care? I say us as if I'm as great as Dr. McNally here, who's actually, we did a side note photo essay of her day in the life where she was delivering a birth. And we had this photo from one of those, you see the joy, you see the ecstasy, you see it's amazing. Why let that evaporate in the delivery room when that same person could speak to people who needed a doctor like her, a voice like her, an empathetic expert like her through content? And so that became our foundation and our rallying cry, is that we have amazing expertise, but it's not being activated to solve the problems in our community. If we could connect those two dots, audience interests, audience behaviors, audience questions, audience pain points, with the experts that solve them on a day-to-day basis, but in actuality, in an exam room, in that kind of setting, if we could connect those two things through content, wouldn't that be amazing? And that's sort of like the crux of what I wanted to talk about today, which is at your organization, this thought exercise of like, how do we use what makes us special to solve the problems that our audience has? So it starts with identifying the problems that your audience has and then saying, okay, of this problem set, what do we actually solve for? What are we actually experts in? And how can we respond to those interests and those needs with that expertise? Our people, if we could make them accessible, we could bridge the gap between patient need or interest in care through content. So how do we do that in a way that's respectful and sensitive and empathetic, doesn't monetize their anxiety, doesn't use scare tactics, isn't overly clinical, overly dry, can really connect to them in the moment, person to person? Because that's, healthcare is marketed globally, but it's felt and experienced very locally and intimately. We can talk about stats and numbers of people who have different conditions, but whenever you have one, whenever a loved one is going through something, none of that really matters except for how are you going to navigate it? Who is the team that's going to provide your care? Who's going to get you through those darkest moments? And are they going to do it with not just clinical expertise, but empathy? So when you zoom out and you think about our strategy and kind of the foundation of the program, this audience, data and interest driven, content marketing program at the highest level, it sort of goes like this. Empathy. So know, love, and serve your audience. Get where they're coming from. Make them feel seen and act with kindness. Access to expertise. Make our expertise and our experiences available at the health system more accessible in every definition of the word. And that would lead to engagement. Building an engaged relationship with the community by serving them through our people's point of view and expertise, their stories, their humanness that you might experience in real life when you're transacting with the system. Could we tap into that same expertise with empathy and bring it to people in those moments of need at 4 a.m. when they're Googling something about their health or wellness? So one of the things that we did, and every great content strategy starts with listening, is that we really mapped out the moments where our audience needed us most. We called these different moments their opportunities for relevance. So the chances throughout the day where our audience might have a need for content, or need for expertise, a need for empathy, a need for someone who's been there before, has gone through that before, and can help them navigate it. So we studied what those different triggers were. We studied what people's needs were, and we studied what people are finding whenever they're pursuing answers for those needs. And you can see from the chart that this was everything from the shoulds, like, oh, I should be drinking more water, I should be taking the stairs, to routines. Hey, I'm turning 40. That means I need XYZ from a routine perspective. I'm turning 50. That means I need to be considering, the following screening. So like plan moments in a life cycle. Obsessions. TikTok has a trend where it says, hey, you should be taking this elixir to help you sleep at night. And then it turns out, actually, well, that's not very good for you. But everybody's talking about it, and a trend is born, and people are getting hurt from following it online. So whenever culture is obsessed with things, like, can we weigh in and be a voice of reason and bust myths and kind of navigate people back to the truth? And then extremes, so life-changing events. A loved one was diagnosed with a terminal illness. What does that person feel in that moment, and what are the needs that they have in that moment? And can we make them feel not alone? Can we be a beacon of light and hope through content that brings them closer to the system where they can get care with empathy? So the first step was really listening. And then to operationalize that, it was really looking into developing an ongoing study of our audience, looking at various sources of data to determine what our audience's interests and needs are. So it's looking at audience benchmarks, like how is our content performing right now that we're producing? Who is influencing our audience on important topics that matter to our system, that matter to our brands? A media diet analysis. What is the daily media diet of the audience? Who are they reading? Are they reading Shape? Are they reading Goop? Are they following somebody on TikTok that maybe shouldn't be giving advice on TikTok? Or, what are they consuming that's leading to their worldview, that's shaping their decisions? By understanding that as a source of influence, we could understand where the opportunity to help them would arrive. And then finally, what's on their mind in their own words? What are they saying in social media? What are they saying on subreddits related to conditions? What are they saying on TikTok in response to different, health and wellness trends? So looking at, like, not just our first party data of how is our content performing, but then saying, all right, who are the influencers out there on the topics that matter most to us? What are the publications and the voices out there that are setting the agenda when it comes to these topics? And then what are people talking about whenever it comes to these issues that matter most? And from there, we can really start to build an assessment of the temperature of the audience, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, how they're being influenced. And then really that drives the opportunity to say, okay, here's what we can do about them, that through content to serve them. So all of these categories and a collection of tools and methods beneath them help to inform the data that we use to plan, so that we can better serve them and drive value for our organization. It's really, I think the mantra is, how do we extend patient care so that it's not just at the hospital level, but it's actually through content. Patient care is extended by serving and solving people's problems, even when they're not touching or interacting with our system physically. And that would be the underpinnings of our entire marketing strategy. So think about the premise of this entire session. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your audience is? Looking at the data points that they're showing can be really, really informative for content planning. So to walk through the example. We go back to this example, our late night coughing fit that that all of us can relate to. So we start to ask, who are the people that are Googling and what do they actually need? Who are they finding when they Google this, and what does that provider actually deliver? And then is this the kind of query we might target in our planning? So behind every Google query like this is keyword volume data, competitive level data to say, here's how many people are searching for it, and here is what they're finding, and here's how competitive that is. And each one of those was an opportunity for us to say, hey, we should weigh in on this. This feels like an opportunity for us to be relevant, or hey, this isn't quite right for our planning. So there are a lot of Google searches like this one every day, like is my coughing fill in the blank. And there's many just like it, not just variants of that phrase, but totally in healthcare, there's so many searches related to so many different topics every single day. More than 1 billion health and wellness related searches per day, nearly 1 in 5 related to health and wellness. And an opportunity like this exists in every category. So if you think about it, I think that's 8.5 billion Google search queries per day. 1 in 5 are related to health and wellness. So a lot of marketers are looking at that little blue dot saying, here's the things that we can say about our brand. They're missing the opportunity to weigh in on things they can say about health and wellness. And so going from a inward focused, here's what our experts want to get out to the world, into an outward focused, here's what our audience wants to get out of our experts, is a mind shift that has allowed us to lead a very, very successful program. I didn't know I did all this building. So how do we keep it was going to be like an animated build and I was going to be all rehearsed, but I apologize. So how do we keep up with all this Googling? The truth is that we don't. It can be overwhelming. And the point here is not even to obsess over keywords. You know, Google search data is just one data point that you can look at, but it's great for the example. But the most important thing is to understand that there's an economy of interest. And for at least part of it, you want relevance. So prioritizing what you target is crucial, because then you have assets that can be used in multiple ways. We think about what will have the highest impact for our organization, for our audience, and that's the kind of content that we create. So is the intent, is this the right context? Is it feasible for us to compete? Do we have the expertise where we can add value? And then will this have staying power? Is it kind of something, an asset that will fade as cultural conversation has moved on? And what we've found by doing this, by targeting opportunities where our expertise can be relevant, is that we've earned more than $500,000 of organic search traffic on an annual basis just by ranking in search for topics related to what our audience cares about and what our health system is expert in. And that's just through search. And there's obviously a lot more gateways to content discovery, but it's just a really clean and good example. So what we do is we look for where our expertise can have the most impact. We identify search trends or social trends. We look for a unique opportunity in the long tail. What's searched on enough to be interesting, but not so much that the competition is too high. We identify the angle that we can take. So sort of like if we were going to cover this like a media company should, that's not trying to monetize anxiety, that's actually trying to serve the audience, what is an angle that we can take to help to solve this? So as an example, this could my cough be cancer, pneumonia, allergies, acid reflux, heart-related hay fever, asthma, lung cancer from mold, from bronchitis, turned it in when we looked closer at the data behind this single query, and this is just one article and one data point, we came up with the concept of help, my cough won't go away. And it was about helping people to get rid of a persistent cough, helping them with an at-home remedy if it made sense, and then flagging to them, you know, here are the cases in which you should actually take a next step and reach out to the doctor who's featured as the answerer of this search query. So how does that look from a content perspective? So bringing it all, we created an article. We actually created an advice column that features a Northwell expert. We interview them on a topic related to the search query, ghostwrite a piece with our seasoned writers that are writing for New York Times, writing for Shape, writing for, you know, leading and influential publications. We directly respond with the expert's expertise to the search query that we see the opportunity for. And we actually, you know, we created 2 or 3 pieces with various angles to tackle this topic, but here's just one example. It's called, we created an advice column called Dear Doctor. And the idea is that we look at, you know, thousands and thousands of queries every single year, and we create hundreds of pieces where we feel we can have the most impact. And so we have an advice column that's based on audience data, and experts within the system get tapped to be interviewed, and the ghostwriter that's kind of the advice columnist answering it for them. It's delivered in an editorial fashion that is empathetic and just like the kind of content that you would want to read in an advice column. It's linked directly to the Northwell expert in the byline. Google likes this because it responds to a specific query with unique expertise from a human. And in the age of AI, that unique expertise from a human will be even more and more important. It has net new information, and it's not a website staff. It's not a, from Northwell Health. It's from this doctor, Dr. Bruni, who's an otolaryngologist. I should have picked an easier one, but she studies this and solves this every single day for real people. So now she's an advice column answerer. And whenever people are 4 a.m. Googling this, they're now finding us. So great, we created a piece of content, right? So yeah, doing this once solves the problem for one person, but the magic happens whenever you've tapped into scale. So we've identified hundreds of phrases that we've targeted, and many which drive significant inbound interest our way. One of these, we just called Dear Doctor. It's an advice column hosted by the experts at Northwell. This is the kind of content that if we could apply this to hundreds and thousands of search queries, we could really build a meaningful presence in Google search and health and wellness queries that would lead people not just to our website, but to the expert and the practitioner that has that expertise and is bookable for an appointment. And so building that system, and there's thousands and thousands of these different, could my cough be this? Why is my back pain that? All of these different queries then lead to an expert answering that question, just like an advice columnist would. They get a step closer to our brand and have the opportunity then to actually learn more about that expert. And we found that targeting opportunities through content formats like this advice column has been really, really effective at, like we talked about before, a lot of hospital systems want to come in with the clinical or sanitized answer. That's not what audiences want. So they're seeking out influencers. They're seeking out people that are making it more pop culture friendly. How can you as a health system create formats that are more pop culture friendly, but also are enshrined in expertise to make it high value, original, and unique and signature to your system? And so these formats, and like I said, Dear Doctor is an advice column. That's just one of them. Formats are planning mechanisms that help us package expertise and plan stories. So they are kind of where the audience data connects with the expertise. We use them as creative guardrails to respond to data opportunities, but we don't limit ourselves, and we're always piloting new ones. We've launched about a dozen and keep the best ones. We repackage them across channels, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But each one is designed to capture and display expertise against an audience need in kind of an inventive way that is competing with the best of the media entities that they're engaging with right now. So taking a closer look at these formats, like how do we package expertise and tell stories at the well in response to audience interest? So the best way I could think of it is to think of yourself as a producer looking to collaborate with talent, kind of like what would the Netflix series on this topic look like? Or what would the advice column on this topic look like? So you're creating formats that allow your experts to shine. It's based on audience research and consumption data. So there's an urgency, there's a need, there's something you can point to that says, hey, expert, you're needed. And we have a really great way to make you look as smart as you are, but also as relevant and approachable as you can be. You're helping experts to show up authentically in the spaces that their patients spend time. And then your job is to kind of work with the expert to guide them through participating in the format and make it fun enough that they want to come back again and again. And so the thought here is that by being audience data driven, which every influencer seems to be today, they're looking at what audiences care about and they're responding with their own perspective. By having an audience data driven healthcare content marketing program, your experts can be the influencers. Your experts can earn the right to have a following in social. Your experts can be the voice of reason at 4 a.m. In Google search. And that's the big thing is audience data how allows you a way to bring your expert in to the fold and be part of your marketing. So just to give you a couple examples, what I wish you knew, we saw in our audience, there was tremendous anxiety among women getting mammograms to the point they were avoiding scheduling them or not following guidelines. And this actually applies to many, many clinical services that both men and women are avoiding because they're anxious about. So instead of giving clinical advice, we give empathetic, practical advice that addresses the audience apprehension right in the headline. what I wish you knew about vaccines, what I wish you knew about vaping, what I wish you knew about hair loss. This is direct wisdom from an expert written in first person, giving them the opportunity to have an open mic to just say, like, what I wish people knew about this thing that I'm an expert in. This is the anxiety I see all the time, and I just wish people would know this. And so what we found is that creating this type of content allows us to be relevant in a way, speaking to that anxiety that people have, and then answering it with an expert that says, hey, it's not so bad, and here I am to walk you through it. Another example is, so your fill in the blank. So a format that provides a visual walkthrough of a process or an experience or a moment someone might be experiencing in their health life. So, for example, we talked before about nobody smiles during a colonoscopy, but you'll find plenty of stock photos that would suggest otherwise. So what we did was came up with a content format called So Your, and fill in the blank, with us going to walk through a procedure or a moment that our audience can relate to. So it's first person point of view. Think a blog post meets a diary entry. And so you're getting a mammogram. So you're trying to detox diet. So you're doing exposure therapy. So you're getting a colonoscopy. Here's how mine actually went down. And what we found is that these assets, both what the expert wishes people knew before they walked in the room, or what the patient actually experiences when they go through something, is a great way to quell that anxiety, to be relevant to those audiences who are wondering about, should I get a colonoscopy? Will it hurt? Will it make me vomit? Should I get a mammogram? Like, it's going to hurt me, but it won't be that bad. So addressing the anxieties and apprehensions with truth and access to expertise has been a great way for us to be an audience data-driven content marketing organization. But it also plays out in more serious topics. So some of those procedures, of course, everything health related is serious and should be treated with respect. But this format also allows us to go really deep and use the power of photography to I talked before about, like, being there for people during life-changing diagnosis. And so what we've also done is, like, had the ability to tell people stories that have gone through something similar. So we had an amazing woman, Jen Rosenbaum, who went through her chemo journey, through breast reconstruction surgery, and an amazing 3-part series of what it's like physically, emotionally, and socially to fight cancer. And this kind of content just really speaks unspoken truths to people that need to hear it most. A day in the life. This format humanizes our experts in a profound way, showing the human behind the work, but also the devotion and passion and dedication to helping people that's invariably on display. So it's not just, hey, this person is an expert and they've got a shiny, like, stock photo that shows that, all of their degrees and everything like that, but show them as a human getting their own kids ready before they go to deliver babies all day. This allows a patient to feel like they're getting to know who's going to deliver care before the healthcare event. So this day in the life is a great way to make your experts more accessible, and that's what people want based on data. So a day in the life of a NICU mom. So the super anxiety inducing thing. I've got 2 young kids, in a big fear, especially when they're infants, is going into the NICU. I've had friends that have gone through it, and it's really it's life-changing amounts of stress. And there's very little to find online or anywhere, really, if somebody just telling you this is what it's like, this is what you can expect, and allowing people access to what's giving them anxiety helps them take that next step. First, being confident, okay, I can get through this because I'm seeing someone else, but also saying, I'm seeing them at this system get through it, and that's where I want to go get care, because they understand the human nature of it. So these formats, these, we've been running this program for a while, but we feel like we're just getting started. We're on pace to have 10 million engagements with the Well content across our website, social channels, and YouTube this year. We're growing audience engagement with the health system and drastically differentiating ourselves from our peer set. We're driving qualified traffic to the .edu transaction pages. We're setting records in media spend efficiency by using the Well content and paid social. And we recently conducted a study on our content that indicates it's improving Northwell's favorability, uniqueness, reputation, and credibility by giving people access to the experts, the expertise, the patient experience that they might actually receive in real life, and bridging that gap between the care that they can get the expertise with empathy that they can get in the anxious moment they're having online as they're scrolling through search results or scrolling through a TikTok feed, wondering what their next step is going to be when it comes to their health and their wellness. So the question became, okay, this is a great foundation, but how can we expand our impact in other areas where our audience was spending time? So audience development and being an audience data-driven content marketing organization is a game of identifying where your audience is spending time, and understanding the topics that they're engaging with, and then figuring out how can we add value there. A lot of healthcare marketers that I talk to have what I call the MD problem. They're a marketing director, but they're trying to market an MD, so an actual, medical expert. And a lot of times that actual medical expert thinks their MD also stands for marketing director. And so there can be this whole, and great respect for these professionals because they're literally saving and changing lives on a day-to-day basis. But they can also start to believe that their worldview is the dominant one, and that they understand the audience and the patient and the community better than anyone. And they have an amazing, tremendous understanding, and that's not to besmirch that at all, because that's what we're going to build from. But what we found is that by showing audience data, by showing search results, by showing forum conversations, by showing TikTok influencers that are amassing huge followings for no good reason, that unlocks the competitive spirit. That opens up their eyes to, hey, wait a second, my expertise is needed. Hey, this is the conversation out there. That's not right. We go, cool, that's not right. What is right? And let's talk about what format we can capture what is right in your expertise in, so that we can bring it to people who are getting the wrong information. And while we're doing that and really focused a lot on search in the early days of the program, we realized that people are spending time in all sorts of places across the internet, particularly YouTube. We saw that YouTube is the second largest search engine after Google, and we knew that there needed to be an opportunity to extend what we were doing in organic search to Google through visual content. So we saw tons of search related to health happening in YouTube as well. And we also saw that a lot of the health content on YouTube was maybe academically substandard. Would have got, C's get degrees, but they shouldn't be influencing people online. So what we found was that there's a huge opportunity for us to create expert-driven content on YouTube. And YouTube was a huge opportunity for us, and was the next kind of proving ground for our content. Because we saw that there was a need for it. So our video team produced a series designed to package our expertise for YouTube as a pilot, called Hack Your Health, expert-driven video series, where it's about, tackling internet health advice, but giving an actual expert to provide the answer, and creating that and packaging that in a kind of YouTube series that's similar to, creator-led or influencer-led, YouTube content. So it's filled with surprising and useful, fun facts about DIY remedies. This series, Hack Your Health, provides people with guidance to stay well, all in a bite-sized and engaging form. So built for the YouTube generation, built for the YouTube viewer, we packaged that same expertise in a new format so that we could reach more people who are going on YouTube and being influenced about all sorts of healthcare topics. You may have heard about podcasting. Obviously we all have, but we saw that, podcast audiences were really growing. The pandemic, there was a huge boom in podcast listening, podcast producing. It's kind of mitigated a little bit, but there's still a lot of engaged podcast audiences. And what we found was that we dug into the channel and found that, about a quarter of the growing base of podcast listeners were interested in health and wellness related podcasts. But when we studied the competition, we saw other health systems. We saw a lot of the same things we were seeing on YouTube and we were seeing in search results, which was, our peers were taking an overly clinical angle to the podcast world. Influencers were kind of bringing a, DIY ethos to health advice. And what we realized was that expertise was really, really needed in the podcast space. And so what we did was those same types of experts that we were working with, we decided let's dive deeper on some of these really thorny issues that we're seeing play out online and bring truth to the room, bring expertise to the room. So the pilot we developed after seeing this opportunity where there's a lot of people interested in health and wellness, and what they were getting was either too clinical or, maybe not so accurate. We wanted to dive into the emotional side of health and wellness in particular, and really just figure out how could we reach people that were being influenced by people that shouldn't be influencing them. So it's a really casual format. It takes a conversational vibe where our managing editor is talking to experts from Northwell about topics. We know that this kind of conversational approach is really effective in podcasting, and allows experts to really be human and be themselves. And what we found was really mining places like Reddit or online discussion groups provided great opportunity for our experts to kind of weigh in on forum threads. So, for instance, we would find different advice column style questions being answered by people in forums that who knows who those people are and who knows how valid that advice is. And we would take these and we would have a podcast episode dedicated to talking about the questions and then giving an expert backed answer on how that person could navigate through it. So this idea of looking at the channel, seeing what's being talked about, seeing who's really leading the conversation, and then determining, does our expertise have an opportunity to be relevant there. And then second to last one is email. So email's death has been predicted since we were checking AOL email addresses, but it's remained a consumer habit for 30 years. So if you think about your personal email address, you probably have the same one today that you did 10 years ago. But in the meantime, how many different social media accounts have you gone through? Probably a lot, and probably you still have one of your old school personal email addresses. The point here is that email is an unsung hero, but a workhorse of great content marketing. And what we found was that people, even of all generations, and the younger generations always say they don't use email until they get into the workforce professionally or even in college, and then they have to use email more and more. So email is an everyone audience. It does skew a little bit up the generational chain, but suffice it to say that almost everyone has an email address and most of them check it a lot. So we know that email is a workhorse for audience acquisition and retention, but we really wanted to develop long-term relationships out of all of our content marketing activities. And you can see with the recent rise of Substack that email is really having a renaissance in publishing. But still, most of the email was coming from hospitals, was announcement heavy, like PR style updates, like meet the CEO. Is that exciting for people, or do they want their health and wellness problem solved? So it's not what people wanted to hear, to open and see in their inbox. And so what we found was that by having a simple email that was just highlighting the expertise that had been published to the well, we experimented with the format, with subject line approach, made it very casual, conversational, kind of creator style. We tested a lot of elements. We've been able to get a 55 to 60% open rate on a 5-figure list. So we're now doing special edition newsletters. That just kind of proves that by basing an email strategy even on audience interest, we found that open rates improved because it was topical driven, and that data that we saw people were interested in other channels actually led to higher performance in email, because it's those same people that have those email addresses that we're actually engaging with. And what we found was that by having this editorial style approach, based on audience data, featuring experts, but very editorial, very like if the Skim were to do health and wellness, what would that look like? We found that we developed a really must-read, must-open email product that set us apart from the community, and most importantly, getting people to join this list, which is one of our primary calls to action, is a fantastic way to build that relationship with the community that Ramon Soto, CMO at Northwell, called for. How do I get a relationship before the health event? Well, you solve problems in search and in social and on your site, and you get people to say, I raised my hand, I want to hear more from you. And now you have a growing and engaged list that you can share announcements with, or you can offer services to. And what we found is that the people who subscribe to this content, compared to people who don't, even within the ecosystem at Northwell, are better patients and more engaged consumers of Northwell content and marketing. So really, really powerful proof case. And then just finally, of course, I mentioned TikTok at the very beginning. That wasn't something anybody could have predicted in the early 80s when I was a middle child, even though I probably would have loved it. And I'm glad that it wasn't there, because man, would I have made the world cringe with the TikToks I would have produced. We'll leave it at that. So TikTok was another proving ground, we saw audience interest in TikTok, and we just, for a while, thought, does it make sense? Is that right? Is it too informal? Does a health system really belong on TikTok? What would that look like? But we couldn't ignore the not just the rapid growth of TikTok, not just like the huge user base they were amassing, but the fact that 40% of young people were basically using TikTok to Google. So this is even Google came out and said this, it's an existential threat to their business, which is people aren't people of a certain demographic, and a lot of these trends go up the chain in terms of generations. So, Gen Z is doing it now. That means that baby boomers are going to be doing it, because, digital trends are led by younger generations and adopted by older generations. And that's proven out in every single different channel. TikTok's no exception. So we're seeing that people are using TikTok as a search engine, literally like going to Cleveland, Ohio, where should I eat? That kind of query going into TikTok. So it's not just an entertainment engine, it's becoming a search engine. So we couldn't ignore it. We said, this is not just where people are spending time, but this is a shift in behavior. We found that with health and wellness, it was actually a huge topic of interest, and a huge opportunity in an area of concern. So we wanted to bring the well there. We wanted to bring our strategy there. And it felt like a place to extend our creativity in a way that other platforms couldn't. So what we did is what we always do, which is study the channel. We saw a lot of interest in health content, and we saw a lot of people sharing their take on health and wellness with mileage varying. We saw some authentic experts, we did, having success. But what concerned us were the unqualified influencers who were amassing influence in this increasingly influential space. How many times can I say influence? So not to pick on her, because I'm sure she's awesome, redacted her name, but there's an influencer on TikTok with more than 100,000 followers. Her bio is wellness and stuff. Not a doctor, but I think I've seen them all. As a health system, this is a red flag, right? Not a doctor, but I think I've seen them all. 3.2 million likes. This is somebody who is not a doctor, is disclosing that they're not a doctor. They've been to a lot of doctor appointments, but they are not necessarily qualified professional. They're sharing their experience. There's a ton of value to that. It's not to knock on that, but this is not an expert. This is, in our minds, not the person who should be shaping conversation, being influential on TikTok. And we said that's a huge opportunity for us. There's a lot of people talking about all sorts of health and wellness topics, and the people who are influencing and driving the conversation maybe could do better if there were more other experts in the room adding to the conversation, to put it kindly. So we felt good that the well should be on TikTok. Just like any audience channel, there's data emerging that's saying that there's interest and there's an opportunity. We look at who's ranking, who's influential there, and we realize it's not really our traditional competitive set. A lot of other hospital systems still aren't even on TikTok, but there's an influencer class that is finding an audience and influencing them. So we started to scout the different opportunities, different concepts where it's like, here's what's happening on TikTok, and can we get our experts to weigh in on them? So, experts test TikTok trends became like a really, really fun one for us. Get into that in a little bit. But the point here was, now we're looking at TikTok as we look at other channels, and then we're bringing to our experts opportunities for them to correct the conversation or to be part of the conversation or add their expertise where there's a void of it. And that same audience data led to our planning. And so to give you an example, we made it really easy. We made it really fun. We had some existing relationships with our experts from our previous work on the well. But we also reached out to new experts that maybe were brand new to the world. And what we did was we created welcome materials and one-sheeter guides and had one-on-one briefing conversations that basically saying, we know you know about TikTok. We know you've probably heard that it's a place that, is a little bit lawless whenever it comes to content, but we are going to bring our expertise there, and you are going to be the star of it. And it's been a lot of fun, and we've learned a lot. Excuse me. I learned on TikTok that you should drink more water. So our amazing team worked to support these experts. Many of them were brand new to the platform, a little bit nervous, but they were really ready to collaborate and kind of have fun with giving, make health and wellness fun, but also be serious when we needed to. And so what we did was we showed them TikTok data, we showed them our kind of content formats, and we said, here's the kind of content we want to create to be part of this conversation. So to give you an example, there's a little bit of a lag. So for instance, in the old world, and we still do this because there's tremendous value in text-based content for its transferability, for its rankability in search, for its all sorts of different values for that. So we still create the text-based content, but in this case, instead of just a text-based article with expert health tips for sun protection, because sun protection in the summer was around when we launched TikTok this past year, was a huge topic, and people were giving advice that wasn't always correct. So what we decided to do was go to a dermatology practice within the Northwell system and reenact The Office. You know, The Office, Dunder Mifflin, bum, 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 bum. I'm so glad we recorded that. I regret immediately butchering that opening. But The Office opening where you meet all of the different characters and they kind of like wave at you or do their little, on character thing. What we did was we said, we're going to play that music because TikTok loves, kind of trending sounds and things that are familiar. But we're going to get that's going to be the backdrop to our dermatology experts giving their favorite sun protection tips, kind of in this the office style video. And this was like a top performer. It's kind of like a expert driven listicle explainer to the tune of the Office theme song. So a listicle in text, but brought visual and made fun. Excuse me. When we really had a lot of fun because TikTok, creating native content in the channel is really what audiences respond to, and that's what our audience research was showing us. So it was like probably, if you're on TikTok, you've seen the Liver King who's eating raw liver and saying like this is the best thing for your health. And so we said, okay, let's get a dietitian to review the carnivore like raw meat diet and share her perspective on if it's good for you or not or why. So responding to trends with expertise allows us to be relevant and part of the conversation, authentic in a way that we couldn't before, and certainly wouldn't be by just sitting on the sidelines or buying ads in this space. It allowed us to be a participant in the community, and that really allowed us to gain a lot of traction in audience engagement. It also allows us to get a little bit wild. So, we had a piece about like mosquito bites in the summer and like why do mosquitoes love me and they avoid my partner. So we had a listicle that talked about the different reasons mosquitoes might bite certain people versus other people, and we narrated it with the mosquito. So this is a mosquito. We had the little eyes and mouth over it, which is like a TikTok trend. So it's an audience interest, something that's going to appeal to them on the platform, but we're delivering our expertise in a way that is funny, but also very, very useful. So the mosquito tells you why she loves your blood more than your partner's. So a way to give, textbook information in a way that's engaging to the audience based on their trends, and based on their interests and like kind of the content formats that work best with them. So one of the other things, perhaps most encouraging, is that our foundational content, I started with like the advice column at the very beginning, plays really, really well into TikTok as well. So we found that people are asking like, what's worse, weed or alcohol? And we did a Q&A and text on that, and it did very well in search and did well in paid social media. We also brought it to the world of TikTok by asking a brain surgeon, does marijuana damage the brain? And I don't know if I can play this here or if it'll work well. So not the typical, white coat, formal button up kind of answer and approach. And this has just been just like our text column allows our community to have access to expertise through like an advice column format. This is Story Corey, who's amazing. She's Northwell's TikTok star, that has been amazing to collaborate with and was born, saying it wrong. She became a star through this program by being willing to be on these videos. So she's kind of like the host. And so what she's done is just gone with these Q&As directly to the experts that can answer them, creating formats in the language of TikTok, because that's based on audience data and interests. And we found that this actually went viral. It was our first viral video, and more than 4 million people watched it, which is not a bad thing to tell your boss. Hopefully that did. Okay, cool. Can I still click through? Okay. And then I know in interest of time, I can kind of skip through this, but the point is here that this idea of studying the audience, figuring out what they're interested in, what keeps them up at night, what channels they're spending time in, what are the norms and the nuances of that channel, who's winning in that channel right now, taking all of that and saying, okay, then what are we going to do about it, is kind of the best way that you can produce marketing in 2024. And I think beyond, which is just study the community, respond to it with your expertise in the channel that they're spending time in, and always offer a next step with your organization. So a few final thoughts. Thanks so much for taking this tour with me. It's a program that we feel really proud of. We feel like every day we just try to make it a little bit better. We feel like we're just getting started. And that's because it's never getting stale. And that's because we're always studying our audience. And that's because our audience is always changing in their interests and their behaviors. And, what matters to them tends to shift. And by building a strategy that is all about studying audience needs, aligning them with our marketing priorities, using that data to have better planning conversations internally, collaborating, with different creative types to decide, should this be a text, Q&A column? Should this be a first person photo essay, uh, you know, uh, diary entry style piece for the site? Should this be a TikTok where we're getting people to dance to the theme of The Office, opening music? Integrating our experts into the content development itself, activating across the channel and repurposing some of the content. That's what I kind of skipped over in the interest of time, to have maximum impact in the channel, and then expanding as your audience's behaviors expand to different channels and sunsetting, some of the channels where they're no longer spending as much time. But most importantly, building a feedback loop for perpetual improvement. So study the audience. Your hypothesis is this kind of content is going to engage the audience. Seeing how that content performs and then adjusting on an ongoing way is the best way to become a truly data-driven, audience-centric, expert-infused content marketing organization. So we've gotten some things right, we've gotten some things wrong, but we always learn and we always improve. So for me, if I could leave you with one final thought, it's, just think about one channel, think about one audience pain point that you can dive into, one expert who can help solve it, and one inventive format that's signature to, we've always wanted to start a talk show. We've always wanted to have an advice column. We've always wanted to fill in the blank with this. Pilot that out. Look at the audience data that shows the opportunity. Bring in an expert who's going to be okay with it being a little bit messy at first. Pilot that thing out, capture how it does, and then share that with your team and say, what happens if we did more with that? What could a pilot look like where your experts help you solve your audience's problems? And then what if that became the governing mantra for everything that we do? So the idea here is that you study your audience, you pilot out content, you test, learn, and you grow, and hopefully you evolve your way to greatness. And that's kind of what we're up to. That's what we love to do. That's what keeps me up at night. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And if you like this, please sign up for our newsletter, revmade.com/subscribe. We love talking about audience behavior, about creative marketing, and all that good stuff. So have an amazing rest of your day. And thank you so much for spending time with me. I'm sorry to take you almost to the end, but there's 3 minutes back.